Welcome to Inking with Jimmy. Today, we're going to be talking about inking comic books with the sponge. I thought I'd make this video about inking textures and effects. Not every comic book page is clean art style. Um, any art style that you draw in, sometimes you want to get a little messy, a little gritty, and you want to add textures. You can see here in this particular part of a page that I'm inking for a project called Crimson Outfit, I created this little smoke texture effect of coming off this little steam coming off this robot by using a sponge in opaque white. Also on the other side, it's a double page spread, and on the spread there's an explosion and there's this black cloud of smoke just going up the top of the page. So I inked it all with the line work that Andre, the penciler, had placed on there, and I thought it'd be neat to place a little effect on the very top where it's just a little bit more texture and a little gritty. It is you can see with the black ink here on the very top right of the page, which is right in the center of your screen, on the left side of your screen, create that smoke effect. What I used is an artist sponge. There's different kinds of sponges. There's a sponge that is a latex. I'm using a natural sponge. And you can see here when I place the ink, you don't place a lot of ink on the sponge. So when I place the ink on the end of the sponge that I want to use and I dab it, kind of like using a stamp. And actually sponges come with ink stamps, are often used with an ink stamp. Depending on what you buy, what kind of set you buy. I buy my sponges individually and without any type of ink stamp because I don't use that kind of ink. But often you'll see that people do use that for different type of effects for different crafts and things. But you can use this in comic books to create textures, and you can see the stamp effect that I've made here, and it starts to look like a bush, or it looks like a tree. So I know in the past, or in different videos, I've mentioned that my favorite way of inking a tree is all with a brush, because I love painting in those individual branches. But sometimes you get a tree that's like further back, and you can just stamp it on pretty quick with using a sponge. And then you can see I took my brush and I started to paint in the bark of the tree. And branches are always uneven, so brush is great because branches just bend and twist and they go all over the place. The bark of the tree isn't even straight. You know, it bends and it has textures, and you can create all that with the brush. And you can see how it even makes the branches look like some of the leaves in the very top right corner look like they're blowing off in the wind. And using the brush to paint in. I say paint because it's a brush, but ink in, the grass blades and stuff, because it's with the brush, it's very soft and it gives you very nice organic textures and look to your artwork. So I can paint in those individual grass blades very quickly with it, and just kind of wisp them in there, and each one bends different, and it gives me a wide variety of line weights depending on the pressure and the angle that I place on my brush, so that it looks like a silhouette of grass blades. And so I'm painting kind of further down, just to kind of give it a little more space there, just so you can see the grass blades and they blend in. And using that same sponge, and I'm actually using the same side of that sponge because each side of the sponge is different. It's a natural sponge. It isn't an even sided sponge. It's a wide variety of sizes and different textures based on each sponge. So I dab that sponge on there lightly, and it starts to create a little bush, a little shrub. Then I flip the sponge over, and as I am dabbing that sponge on there, I start to fill in the center of it. The lighter you are, the less ink that of the shrub that it will fill. Then you start dabbing more, and with a little more pressure, and you get more ink, and it fills in a little more. So the center of your shrub, you want thicker, closer lines together. That texture to be closer because there's less light because the bush becomes more dense in the center. So then I play with it on the left side, and I created more, almost like foliage or just little, bushes or I don't know, just weeds growing out there. And those little textures are quick, they're easy, and it's a neat effect. Each sponge will give you a different texture and effect. So you want to play with the sponge. Get a blank sheet of Bristol board and just start stamping different type of pressures and different angles and different sizes of your sponge, and give it give it a try, experiment, and see what kind of texture it gives you. So once you experiment with it and you keep trying and trying out new things, and then you can get creative and look at each stamp print and think to yourself, use your mind's eye and go, what does this look like? Then you can use that same stamp effect to then mimic or imitate the leaves on the tree. You can see here now that the way that here's a closer look here at the tree. You can kind of see how it looks like a bunch of different little branches, and each person, when you look in there, you're probably going to see something different than the person next to you. So then, aside from tree branches and foliage and nature and organic things, I spoke earlier about using it for a cloud or smoke effect, because you can do both. You can do clouds with it, but here, let's say there's some smoke and it's coming off the bush that I had just stamped on the bottom right of the tree. So I pencil in real quickly, real loose. We're using a 2H, it's a wooden pencil, just real quick, loosely smoke. Because smoke isn't really in any controlled pattern. It really just depends on the air and temperature and stuff. It blows all over. So it changes shape. So I just quickly kind of scribble some stuff in there. Now I'm placing ink on my stamp. And you really don't want to place a lot of ink on there, because it will, it really, very little ink will spread very quickly, and it's much darker. So you can always add ink. So start out with less ink, because it's harder to take away the ink, and it's easier to build up that ink. So you can see here where there's less ink and it starts to kind of get a little dry, and it's giving me that kind of dry brush effect where it's a lighter shade of the black, where it's almost a gray, and I'm kind of stamping it on there, and it's giving me that second level, almost like an ombre or a gradient kind of effect. And the way that you place down your stamp, the way you stamp the sponge onto your Bristol board, it's gonna depend on what kind of texture it's gonna give you. So you can see here I'm going in the shape and the direction of the smoke, sort of a curved effect, and I'm leaving white spaces in there. And as I start to build it up, you'll start to see why those white spaces are left in there. I flip the sponge over, and you can see here where one side of the sponge is wider, and then the opposite end is much more narrow. That gives me the ability to go in and put in smaller and finer little areas, kind of fill in different areas. So I start with the stamp effect. I go in, I stamp in different little things, little shapes, kind of rounded, curved shapes. I also wait until even after the ink is already thinning on the sponge and it's almost drying, and I did those kind of dry brush effects as well. But not only that, as well, what you can also do is, instead of stamping directly down and then lifting your hand back up, if you stamp down and slightly, or lightly drag your hand left or right, you'll get this kind of smudge or smear effect. And as you can see here, that's what I'm doing now. I'm starting to smooth it out, kind of blending in a little bit of the smoke, because the smoke end of it isn't going to be as rough as the tree is, where the tree is just like black to white. This is going to kind of blend and kind of fade as it blends into the air. So I kind of drag my hand that way to kind of create that smear effect, that blend. So you can see here, I pull the camera back just a little bit, and you can kind of see where it's further back, and you can start to see the smoke effect, how it is, it's starting to look like that, like it's smoke. Um, and inside the smoke, whenever something's burning, these if it's a bush, the leaves or little parts of the branches, things that become lighter than air with the heat, will then burn up into the air. So I start putting those little details, a little white in the black, where you see little flakes of leaves or little things just kind of going up into the air. They're elevating, and I do that with the reverse inking, the opaque white ink over black ink, and then I will then do the same in reverse. I will then add extra pieces in black over the white area. But since this is in my imagination, my mind's eye, what I saw there was just sort of I thought I would do like a flame or a burn coming off of that the bush on the bottom right corner of the tree. So then I get my brush that I use. I have a watercolor brush that I use for the whenever I do white effects and opaque white. So I dip it in some of the Dr. Martin bleed proof white, and then I start going in there and creating these kind of zigzag, jagged, because flames, kind of have that kind of angular, zigzag kind of look. And I start doing that at the very base, the beginning of the smoke, but not exactly on top of the bush, kind of creating that little bit of space, because the flames almost kind of they don't seem to burn directly on the bush. They kind of seem like they're kind of lifted off of it. If you ever watch a movie or you're ever at a campfire, and you kind of watch that flame effect, and you can kind of see where I'm kind of, I mean, we're further back now with the camera. You can kind of see now what I was talking about. And I touched in just a little more with the brush. I felt that it needed to be just a little more little flakes and things flying. And not only within the smoke, little pieces of leaves and things like that will float off into the air, because the air is heated, it's hot, and things will float. And you can see the little flakes that I decided to start putting in with my brush. And the more creative that you get, and by observing things, observing flames and fires, and watching things in movies or on YouTube, or we've got tons of resources now, and you can watch these flames. The more information that you provide your brain with, then when you're using your imagination, it pulls from that resource. It remembers. Now, I talked earlier about using a blank sheet of paper and creating these stamp effects to see what you get. And this, you can see, is a direct dab up, down. There's a drag. It's two different type of effects. And if you've ever watched Jim Lee's his FaceTime or his Facebook, live feeds, he uses a Kleenex, or tissue paper, I should say. He uses a tissue paper to smudge and smear his ink. And he did this beautiful Superman artwork for the new movie of I think it's a Blu-ray case or something, but it was a beautiful Superman, and he does this effect with the tissue. Well, you can also do that with the sponge. I like the sponge rather than just the tissue, because the sponge, then using the same tool, gives me different textures. So then I got creative, and I said, all right, I smudged this, and said, hey, all right, what does this look like to me? Use your imagination. Smudge something on the paper, and then look at it and go, it's like a fun exercise. Look at it and go, what can I make out of it? So I thought, hey, let's make like a phoenix, or a silhouette of a bird. I decided to smudge, and it looked like a wing, so I made a wing on the left side, and then I used my brush to kind of get the shape of the bird's beak and the inside of his head. Then I go back in with the smaller end of one of my sponges, and I smear it, and I blend it. You can see like his now you can see his little feathers or hair coming off the back of his head, and it blends in, and it looks like the style of the rest of the image. So get creative, stamp some stuff on there, and practice making different shrubs. Like a shrub or bush or trees, or or anything. Use your imagination. I made a smear and I said, oh, let's make it look like a phoenix or a bird, and so then I see the body there, and I see how you can see on the top of his head. I used the smear, kind of a light left to right um, texture, and you can see now it's starting to, it looks like a bird, and in here I'm showing here where you stamp down, and the less ink and the lighter you are, the different type of print you're going to get. Um, and if you have more ink and the harder you press, the thicker and more dense that stamp effect will look. And you see those drag effects, almost like a dry brush. So get creative. Experiment. And I know I've said that a few times. But I've learned as a parent, though, the more and more that you repeat something, that the easier it is absorbed. But yeah, just have fun, and because that's what our work is. It really is. It's about getting creative and enjoying it. You don't have to buy a million sponges. You can just get just a few. I bought 3 or 4 in one single pack. It was about $6 to $8. Um, so just get yourself a different small set, and you can make a wide variety. Never let the ink dry on your sponge, and to clean your hands or your sponge, you can use the artist soap. Cleans it up right away. All right, well, thanks again for spending time here with me, and I will see you in the next video.